The thumping rotors of the CH-53E Super Stallion drowned out everything else, leaving only the roar of the engine and the pounding of my heart. The air inside the helo felt thick and heavy, even as the icy wind howled through the open tailgate. I could barely see my own hands under the red cargo lights, but I didn't need to. My fingers worked on muscle memory, checking and rechecking the straps of my Kevlar, the magazine seated in my M4, anything to keep my hands busy. "Monroe, you hearing this?" Tex shouted over the deafening noise, leaning in close. I could feel his grin even before I saw it under the dim light. "What now?" I muttered, glancing at him as I adjusted my NVGs. He was always running his mouth, and tonight was no different. He tapped my arm. "Sarge says we're linking up with SOCOM boys. You know what that means. Spooky ops, my guy. Ain't no way they dragged us jarheads out here for a milk run." I couldn't help but roll my eyes. "You said that last time, and we spent 6 hours digging foxholes in the rain." Tex chuckled, unfazed. "This is different. They're saying some tech went sideways in Taliban hands. Big stuff. Command wants it back." Before I could reply, Staff Sergeant Morales' voice cut through the noise like a whip. "Monroe, Carter, shut it down and focus up." "Yes, Staff Sergeant," we barked in unison, though I could hear Tex mumbling under his breath, something about grumpy pants. I kept my head down, hiding a smirk. No point in getting Morales riled up. The man could chew you out faster than you could say "oorah." I glanced toward the cockpit. Through the open door, I caught sight of Hawkeye, our pilot, calm and steady as the bird jostled through turbulence. If he wasn't worried, I wouldn't be either, or so I told myself. The mission brief had been vague: a remote village in Helmand Province, a downed drone, a mysterious energy signature that had everyone from the Pentagon to the NSA in a frenzy. Whatever it was, Command wanted it back, alive, intact, or otherwise. 5 minutes to LZ, Hawkeye called back. His voice was crackling over the comms, and my stomach twisted at his words. "Here we go." The helo touched down in a storm of dust and rotor wash, and the moment my boots hit the dirt, I felt the air change. It was colder here, sharper, like the ground itself was warning us to leave. My M4 was up, my finger hovering over the trigger, as Tex and I fanned out with the squad to form a perimeter. "Something feels off," I muttered, barely audible over the comms. "You feel off," Tex shot back, his voice low but amused. I didn't reply, keeping my eyes on the dark ridgeline ahead. The Green Berets were already waiting for us, their team leader, Captain Grant, stepping forward to brief Morales. Grant was an intimidating guy, all sharp features and harder eyes. He looked like he'd been through hell and back, and made a habit of visiting. "We're hunting something high-tech," he said. His voice was low, gravelly, like gravel in the blender. "You see anything weird, you call it in. No heroics." Weird. That wasn't the kind of word you wanted to hear on a mission. We moved under the cover of NVGs, the surreal green glow of the terrain making the jagged Afghan mountains look alive. The silence was the worst part. No gunfire, no voices, not even the distant hum of a goat herd. Just us and the crunch of boots on dirt. We reached the village after about an hour, though calling it a village was generous. It was a graveyard. The mud brick huts were crumbled and abandoned, the remains of a fire still smoldering in the center of the settlement. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. "Tex," I whispered, "you seeing anything?" "Not yet," he muttered back, "but my gut says we're not alone." The glow was faint at first, barely noticeable through the NVGs. It pulsed from a hut on the far side of the village, casting strange, flickering shadows. My heart stammered as I raised my rifle, signaling Tex to follow me. "Staff Sergeant," I whispered into the mic, "we've got something weird." "Hold position," Morales ordered. His voice clipped. "Grant, you seeing this?" "Affirmative," Grant replied. "Could be the package. Proceed with caution." Tex was right behind me as I stepped into the hut, the glow growing brighter with each step. When I saw it, my breath caught in my throat. The device was about the size of a football, but it was sleek and black, with glowing blue lines etched across its surface. It looked alive, like it was breathing. The air around it felt electric, my hair standing on end as I edged closer. "What the hell is that?" Tex whispered, his voice trembling. "No idea," I replied. But even as I said it, I couldn't shake the feeling that it was looking at us. Morales and Grant entered behind us. "That's the package," Grant said. his tone grim. He motioned to one of his men to secure it, but Tex wasn't having it. "Wait," Tex interjected. "Should we even be touching that thing? It looks like it'll zap us straight to hell." Grant shot him a look that could melt steel. "Do I look like I'm asking for your opinion, Private?" Before Tex could respond, the low growl echoed through the night, freezing us all in place. The growl came again, louder this time and closer. My pulse spiked as I spun toward the sound, my rifle sweeping the darkness. "I don't like this," Tex whispered, his voice tight. "Hold your ground," Morales barked, but even he sounded rattled. The shadows shifted, and then I saw it. A flicker of movement on the ridgeline, something tall and lanky, too fast to be human. My finger hovered over the trigger, sweat dripping into my eyes. And then the radio crackled, a burst of static that made me jump. It wasn't our frequency. "Leave it." The voice was guttural, distorted, and unmistakably not human. "Staff Sergeant," I whispered, my throat dry. "What the hell is going on?" "Shut it, Monroe." Morales snapped. "Stay focused." But the voice was still in my ears, like it was whispering just for me. As I turned back toward the glow of the device, I realized something terrifying. It was whispering back. The whispering wouldn't stop. They were soft at first, curling around the edges of my thoughts like smoke. But now they were loud, insistent, pressing into my skull until I couldn't hear anything else. It wasn't words exactly, more like feelings, sensations, but they were unmistakably not my own. "Monroe, snap out of it!" Morales' voice cut through the haze, sharp and commanding. I blinked hard, shaking my head as the world came rushing back. The squad was in chaos. Shadows darted around the perimeter, figures too fast to track. The crack of gunfire lit up the night, muzzle flashes stuttering like a broken strobe light. Tex was at my side, firing wildly into the dark, his breathing ragged. "They're everywhere," he shouted, his voice cracking. "We're screwed, man. We're so screwed." "Stay on target," Morales barked, but I could hear the tension in his voice. Then I felt a sharp, searing pain in my arm. I looked down to see a shallow scratch glowing faintly blue, the same color as the device. My stomach dropped. "Staff Sergeant," I said, my voice trembling. "I'm hit." Morales glanced at me, his face hardening. "How bad?" "Just a scratch," I lied, though the pain was spreading fast, a burning ache crawling up my arm. My head swam, the whispers growing louder. "You're still in the fight, Marine," Morales said, his tone unyielding. "Don't make me carry your ass." I nodded, forcing myself to focus. But as I raised my rifle, my hands were trembling. The whispers twisted into laughter, hollow and mechanical, and I knew it wasn't coming from outside, it was inside me. We fell back toward the edge of the village, the device cradled in its protective case. The Green Berets were gone, their gear scattered like discarded toys. I didn't ask where they'd gone, I was too afraid of the answer. The creatures were closing in, their glowing eyes forming a ring around us. I could feel them now, their thoughts pressing against mine like an unwelcome guest. They weren't just hunting us, they were hurting us. "We need exfil," Morales shouted into his radio. "Now!" Static. "Damn it," Morales cursed, slinging his rifle. He looked at me, his gaze flickering to the blue vein spreading up my arm. "Monroe, still with me?" I don't know," I admitted. My vision was flickering now, shifting between the green glow of my NVGs and the strange electric blue hue. I could see things I wasn't supposed to, fractures in the air, ripples of energy radiating from the device. And then I felt it, a pull, deep and primal, dragging me toward the device. I didn't want to touch it, but my body wasn't listening. My feet moved on their own, and before I realized it, I was standing over the case. "What the hell are you doing?" Tex shouted, grabbing my arm. His touch broke the trance, and I stumbled back, gasping. I don't know," I stammered. But I did know. The device was calling me, and it was getting harder to resist. The first creature attacked without warning, a blur of shadow and teeth. It lunged at Tex, its claws raking across his chest. He screamed, stumbling back as blood poured from the wound. "Get off him," I shouted, firing into the creature's torso. It shrieked, its movements jerky and unnatural, before collapsing in a heap. But it was too late. Tex was on his knees, his breathing shallow. "Monroe," he gasped, clutching his chest. "Something's wrong." I dropped to his side, my rifle forgotten. His veins were glowing now, blue light spreading like a spiderweb under his skin. His eyes met mine, wide with terror. "I don't want to be one of them," he whispered. "Don't let me turn into one of them." "Tex, just stay with me," I asked, shaking him. But his body convulsed, his limbs twisting in unnatural directions. He let out a guttural scream, and then he was gone. His face contorted into a grotesque grin, his eyes glowing with the same eerie light. I stumbled back, my heart shattering. Tex. The thing that had been Tex lunged at me, its movements inhumanly fast. I raised my rifle, my finger hesitating on the trigger. Somewhere deep in those glowing eyes, I thought I saw him, my friend, my brother. But then it roared, and I fired. Tex's body crumpled to the ground, but there was no time to grieve. The creatures were closing in, their whispers growing louder in my head. My vision blurred, the blue glow overwhelming everything else. I turned toward the device. I didn't know why, but I knew it had the key. The whispers wanted it, needed it, and so did I. "Monroe, what are you doing?" Morales shouted, his voice distant and hollow. I didn't answer, my hands moving on their own, reaching for the device. The moment I touched it, a surge of energy shot through me, searing every nerve in my body. I screamed, but I couldn't let go. Images flooded my mind. Alien worlds, strange machines, endless darkness. And then I understood. The device wasn't changing us, it was linking us, merging our minds into a single unified hive. The creatures weren't individuals, they were pieces of a whole. And now, so was I. The connection roared through me, overwhelming my senses with an unrelenting flood of images, emotions, and thoughts. My mind expanded, reaching places I couldn't have imagined, worlds I couldn't have dreamed. I saw their home, a planet of endless darkness, its skies streaked with electric storms. Vast metallic spires rose from the ground, humming with an energy that defied physics. These creatures, no, not creatures, but constructs, were bred here, their bodies grown in shimmering vats of a liquid light. They weren't alive in the way we understood it. They were vessels for something greater, fragments of a collective intelligence that spanned galaxies. And I saw why they were here. Earth wasn't their first target. It was just the next in a long line of worlds, each chosen for the same reason, raw materials to sustain their endless expansion. They didn't invade like armies. They infiltrated, seeding their technology, transforming the native population into extensions of their hive. It was efficient, elegant, and horrifying. Their transportation wasn't what I expected. There were no ships or fleets. They moved through rifts, tearing through space-time itself. The device I was holding, it wasn't just a beacon, it was a tether, anchoring their collective to our world. Without it, the rift would close, and they would be severed from Earth. The hive pressed against me, pulling me deeper. It wanted me to give in, to become another extension of its will. But I wasn't like the others. I had something they didn't: individuality. My thoughts were jagged, erratic, messy. I was chaos, and chaos wasn't something the hive could predict. I reached into the hive's mind, feeling its rage as I turned its own power inward. One by one, the nodes of its consciousness blinked out, collapsing under the strain. The creatures around me faltered, their glowing eyes dimming as the hive unraveled. And then everything went dark. When I woke up, I was strapped to a gurney, bright fluorescent lights burning into my eyes. My head throbbed and my mouth tasted like copper. I tried to sit up, but thick restraints held me in place. "Don't move," a calm voice said. A man in a crisp black suit loomed over me, his expression unreadable. Behind him, two armed guards stood at attention, their rifles held low but ready. "Where am I?" I croaked, my throat raw. "You're in a classified facility," the man replied, his tone clipped. "You've been decontaminated, stabilized, and isolated. What you did out there," he paused, as if searching for the right words, "it's under review." I glanced down at my arms, half expecting to see blue veins, but my skin looked normal. Almost. The faint shimmer lingered, like an afterimage burned into my retinas. Am I me? I whispered. For the most part, the man said. His answer wasn't reassuring. The other men entered the room, each carrying a thick folder. One of them placed it on the table beside me, flipping it open to reveal a stack of papers. On the top, bold letters read, Non-Disclosure Agreement. This is the first of many, the suited man said. You will read, initial, and sign each page. If you refuse, you will be remanded to indefinite detention. Do you understand? What did I do? I asked, my voice rising. I saved you, didn't I? I stopped them. The man's expression didn't change. You made contact, he said simply. That makes you a liability. The words hit me like a punch in the gut. Liability. Not a hero, not even a survivor, just a loose end to tie up. But as I stared at the papers, something shifted in the corner of my vision, a faint flickering blue light. It was gone as quickly as it appeared, but I knew what it meant. The hive wasn't gone, not completely. It was still inside me, watching and waiting. And for now, I think I'd keep that to myself. With a trembling hand, I picked up the pen and signed the first page. Good, the man said, his voice as cold as the room. Welcome to the rest of your life, Private Monroe.